There is nothing in fish flesh that we require, certainly not these fabled omega-3 fats. The truth is, fish don't make them. Those important oils are made by algae cells, plant cells that float in the ocean. And fish swim in the ocean with their mouths open, swallowing algae all day. And it's really algae omega-3s that are winding up in the fish's flesh. And we are clear-cutting the oceans. We are strip mining the oceans with these massive trawler nets. Fish is the best thing you can consume if you want to keep your level up of mercury, pesticides, dioxins, and carcinogenic hydrocarbons. You want to eat fish because these animals accumulate all the toxins we've been pouring into the oceans as we treat them like sewers.
But there's one other reason, and that's the case of rancidity in fish oil and the toxicity of fish. Cold-pressed and delicate oils have the risk of going rancid if they're not stored properly or refrigerated after opening. But fish oil in particular is very prone to rancidity, even under proper preserving conditions. On a personal note, when I worked at a health food store, a coworker and supplement specialist shared with me that they believe most people are consuming rancid fish oil without even knowing it because of how easily it goes bad. And the turpentine smell that refrigerated fish oil often has, as well as the fish oil burps that people get after taking just a teaspoon or two of fish oil, are actually telltale signs of oil rancidity. And if you don't believe me, you can just look it up. Rancidity and spoilage of fish oil is the #1 complaint, aside from the awful taste, that fish oil consumers report. And furthermore, consuming fish has never been more hazardous and dangerous to long-term human health. Mercury levels are the most recognized concern regarding fish consumption, and the FDA, as well as health organizations, have a lot of implemented warnings and recommendations for pregnant mothers to limit the types of fish they eat and how much fish they eat because of the risk of mercury toxicity for their developing child. And fish doesn't just contain mercury, it contains all sorts of environmental toxins, dioxins, pesticides, furans, PCBs, and then there's the saturated fat and cholesterol in fish, which a lot of people are convinced is good for them, so I'll just leave that one alone for now. And according to a report by the Environmental Working Group of an analysis of fish contaminants and nutrient data, people who follow the federal government's guidelines on seafood consumption are likely to consume too much mercury and too few omega-3 fatty acids. And the truth is, the plant kingdom is abundant with omega-3 fatty acids. There are so many wild edible weeds, foods, and berries that we just haven't cultivated, that are not common in our diet for the reason that we simply haven't cultivated them, and we've kind of just followed the herd and bought whatever we've been fed, and bought whatever has been advertised to us, and followed tradition. But if we were to actually start taking the time, even just a week out of every year, to study wild edibles and get to know what the plant kingdom has to offer and start purchasing them or cultivating them, we would eventually be working towards a society where we have a diet abundant in nutrient-dense plant foods. My name is Erin, and this is Food for Thought. So here's an interesting story that's in the news today. In North Portland, Oregon, a chicken has caused a traffic jam because it was trying to cross the road. And not only were cars stopped for the sake of the chicken, but local authorities were called. And there's actually a phone clip. Let's hear it.
Non-emergency.
Hi, this is actually not a prank call, but there is a chicken trying to cross the road off of Highway 30 across from the lighthouse.
Cute story, right? But I'm not just sharing this story because it's cute. I'm sharing it because it's particularly interesting when you study the behavior of our society. Because when people are driving down the road and a duck or a chicken or a family of geese are trying to cross the road, that's usually what happens. People stop and they wait and they watch and admire them.
Oh, that's too cute.
Their cuteness, their spunkiness, how they walk, their little faces and beaks. But then drive 3 blocks down to the nearest fast food joint and order some chicken nuggets or a junior chicken burger.
Alrighty, your total comes to $13.36 at the window. Thank you.
Thank you.
We desire to see the chicken safely make it to the other side of the road, yet not only participate in the confinement and slaughter of millions of chickens every year, but say and do absolutely nothing when they are violated and pieces of their body are dismembered, fried, and then put on menus with adjectives like juicy, succulent, and crispy. So what I want to know is, if we wouldn't just keep driving and run over the chicken when we don't have to, how come we're okay with this? How come we pay and give our money and support to this when we also don't have to?
Chickens and turkeys raised for meat have been bred to grow so large so quickly that many suffer crippling leg disorders, chronic joint pain, and even fatal heart attacks. Sick or injured birds often have their necks broken. Others are clubbed to death. Those who live to reach market weight are thrown into transport crates and loaded onto trucks bound for slaughter plants. Handling is often violent and frequently causes bruises, broken bones, and other injuries. At the slaughter plant, the birds are dumped from their crates, then roughly snapped upside down into moving shackles by their fragile legs. From there, the birds are dragged through an electrified vat of water which renders them paralyzed, but not necessarily unconscious. They are then pulled across a blade which slices their throats, causing blood to pour from their necks. Some of the birds who miss the blade have their throats slit or their heads ripped off by a backup killer. Other birds are drowned and scalded in the tanks of hot water designed to loosen the bird's feathers.
It just blows my mind that the only difference between some beings, such as a chicken, being safe and guided and looked after and waited for and protected,
Someone stand on that thing over there.
or being confined, abused, neglected, violated, and slaughtered, is whether or not they're on a road or in a building that we don't have access to. Why, people? Why? Here's why. Habit, addiction, peer pressure, convenience, and taste. And none of those are a necessity. So, was it that this is just a really lucky chicken? Or that we're not actually putting our moral instinct into action? And that we've got a little catching up to do with what we pay for and how we let other people treat beings that we have the instinct to protect.
Come here. Come here.
Because honestly, if during that traffic jam I went into the middle of the road and picked up the chicken by its leg and slit its throat, I think there'd be a lot of traumatized children and a lot of traumatized and angry adults that would get out of their cars and say, "What are you doing?" And I would say, I'm just doing what's done every day all around the world. I'm just doing what you pay for. I'm just doing what you have accepted your entire life to this innocent being that doesn't want to die. Just some food for thought. Alright guys, so since everyone's so busy these days, I'm gonna explain to you how the dairy industry works in 5 minutes. Like other female mammals, cows only lactate, or produce milk, when they're pregnant or have a newborn to feed. So the dairy industry inseminates or impregnates cows starting at the age of around 12 months over and over and over again so they keep making milk. And it's a rather routine process. You see, first the industry jacks off a bunch of bulls, sometimes using a hand or help from an electro-ejaculator, which is basically a giant cow dildo that goes into the anus of the bull until he blows. And that semen is collected and then inserted into the vagina of a female cow with a long tube, usually while she's confined in what the industry calls a rape rack. And sometimes they put their fist right into the anus of the female cow, you know, to loosen the area.
To make the process as effective as possible.
What are you feeling for in there when you, it's a bit jumpy? I think I would be if someone did that to me.
Just bringing it out. He massages a little bit just to relax everything and help that semen go where it needs to go.
You must be responsible for a lot of calves.
Yes.
And when that baby cow is born, it's pretty much immediately taken away from its mother and locked in a crate. Because if it stayed around mom, it would drink her milk. And that shit's for us. And you see, a mother cow's bond with her young is very strong and affectionate, and she sometimes cries out for days in search of her baby. But nobody gives a shit. If the baby's a male, his throat is slit and he's sold for veal. And if it's a girl, she's raised to be a milk machine like mom. So dairy cows are continuously, repeatedly kept pregnant their whole lives to keep them lactating. This leads to premature aging, exhaustion, and mastitis, a painful yet common condition in dairy cows, which is inflammation and sometimes infection of the udder. Pus and blood in the milk of dairy cows is also common, so it's usually filtered. But not completely, because in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, up to 400,000 somatic cells are legally allowed in every milliliter of cow's milk. And in the United States, 750,000 somatic cells per milliliter. In Brazil, 1 million. And somatic cells, most of which in this case are white blood cells, are the same thing that erupt on the top of a big zit, so you could call it pus. The more bacteria, inflammation, and infection, the higher the somatic cell count. But don't worry, there's a limit. And when a dairy cow is finally too physically and emotionally exhausted to continue on, she collapses. These cows are called downers, and they are dragged out by whatever means to be killed and sold for beef. It's common in the industry, even on organic dairy farms, for cows to go down after about 4 or 5 years of continuous milk production. But peak milk production declines around 4 to 5 years anyways, so if the dairy cows are still standing, they're gonna be killed for hamburgers and beef regardless. You see, the dairy industry is the meat industry. Almost every single dairy cow that you will ever buy milk that came from ends up being killed for meat. So if you're vegetarian, you might want to think about this, because at least when you're being raised for meat, you're just raised for meat and killed. But when you're a dairy cow, you are sexually exploited and emotionally and physically exhausted until you can't take it anymore, and then you're killed for meat. Sounds worse to me. And the natural lifespan of a cow that hasn't been completely exploited? 20 to 25 years, y'all. And as far as the calcium and protein thing goes, study after study after study has shown that those consuming the highest quantities of dairy actually have the highest cases of bone fracture and osteoporosis. And there are dozens of amazing plant-based sources of calcium and protein, so you really don't need to suck the tits of a cow. I mean, the dairy industry has wormed their way into education systems, nutritional programs, and media to convince us that we need to drink milk. But when you're in school learning about how good milk is for you, that's not because there was a panel of people who care about your health that determined that. That's because the dairy industry paid lots of money for you and your children to hear that message in school, and on TV, and on billboards, and magazines, and for your doctors who don't have to take more than a few hours of a nutrition course to tell you to drink your milk. You see, rhino milk is for baby rhinos. Dog's milk is for baby dogs. Cat's milk for baby cats. Rat milk is for baby rats. And cow's milk is for humans? No, it's for baby cows. And vegans are crazy? Dairy is fucking scary. Try almond milk, hemp milk, soy milk, flax milk, rice milk, Brazil nut milk, macadamia nut milk, cashew milk, any milk but dairy milk.